Hey guys, afternoon. Welcome to my home. Nice of you to oh, nice of you to pop in. Um, I was just watching Matt Walsh. I watch him quite a bit. I agree with like fucking 90% of what he says. Uh, but then he talks about Christianity, and he's not. He's a Christian, no doubt. Uh, right from the cookie cutter itself. Just knocked right out of. He could have went to seminary school, I'm sure, and fit right in. Um, but that makes him very far from the Bible. I was listening to a preacher one time, and he said I was watching this seminary, and my preacher would read from the Bible from one pulpit, and then he'd preach his sermon from a different pulpit, and the reason that he had to do that, the guy said, was because what he was saying over here was so far from what he was saying over there that they're so unrelated that you had to separate the two. Totally different stuff. And that's what all this is, right? And so he's trying to mush aliens and the huge universe and Spaceballs. And if you haven't seen that movie, go watch it. It's a wonderful movie. He's trying to mash all that together with the Bible. And the Bible is so far from Spaceballs, it's unbelievable. Spaceballs, when they're trying to steal the air from the planet to take to their planet, so they send this big ship to go and steal the air, and it turns into Mega Maid. I'm sorry, I'm ruining the plot for you. And excuse me, but the whole movie's funny, so you can watch the whole thing. I see your Schwartz is as big as mine. Um, the the Mega Maid, it turns into, and then it goes over and it opens the shielding for the planet that holds the oxygen in, and Mega Maid puts her vacuum on, and it sucks all the trees, and all the oxygen gets sucked out of the planet, right? And people are all dying, right? And well, if space was real and we had a hole in our ozone layer, which is just nothing, um, we'd be sucked out through that fucking hole so quick. Boom, we'd all be gone. All the fucking, and you'd be humans and organic life would be torn apart to the molecule and evenly distributed throughout space. That's how a fucking vacuum works. So when we shot a rocket out the first time and we got out and we made that penetration out to space or a probe or anything, that there's a hole, man. That's it. That's all it would take. It would just be like a fucking balloon. We'd be sucked dry. Do experimentation. And then let's say that some magical mystical force could hold the atmosphere but not, and then all the stuff that you guys believe about what gravity does is just fucking astronomically fucking stupid. The force could not do that, right? You might as well believe it's not track it, Star Wars. The force is more based in reality than gravity. the thought of a metachlorite being a molecule in our atmosphere that we could somehow, with our minds, be able to manipulate is a lot more fucking realistic than fucking outer space and Earth flying through this huge vacuum and then rockets shooting through and gravity holding the atmosphere but not doing the Coriolis effect, and that the world's spinning but we can take off on a plane and go against the spin but we don't notice it, and you don't have to go faster than the world spinning in order to gain ground. Like, oh well, you don't notice because you're the atmosphere and the atmosphere is moving with it, and so you don't know. Even when you're in the plane, you're moving with the atmosphere, even though you're moving against the planet and against the spin. And it's like, man, how in the fuck are you educated or whatever? Like, what the? How gullible can you possibly be? At some point, you got to say, okay, no, okay, that's just fucking silly. Right? You'd think it would be with the bending water, which is stupid. Lost tribes of Israel. Really? We just lost them? Whoops, they're gone. But then Christopher Columbus sailed over here. Why do you think he brought Hebrew translators with him? Just a coincidence? Maybe. And how long do you think it took for the Hebrews to figure out that the natives and them had the same alphabet and basic same language? Right? And when you hear the natives dancing around the fires and singing, Hina Hoya Hina, it's not that, man. It's Hallelujah, Hallelujah. Praising God. One of the tribes even had the fucking breastplate of Israel. I think it was a remake of it, but they actually wore it. And they didn't really know what they were. Now, so we are told, they didn't really know why they were wearing it, blah, blah, blah. But for some reason, we killed the elders and certain tribes. My thought to that is we killed the tribes that were closest to the Hebrews, right? And we killed the people who knew the most about their heritage and where they came from. And then once you make that separation of one generation, just like they did with the two tribes that they brought here on the ships. That's not what I'm supposed to be talking about today, but I'm going to, obviously. So, because they brought... so anyways, we found... they brought the other ones on the ships. And that's all scripture, and that fulfilled the prophecy. But the lost 10 tribes, they went into what's called the diaspora. Both tribes went into diaspora. So you got all the tribes, you got the 10 northern tribes and the 2 southern tribes, and they weren't getting along at all. They were fighting with each other, and they were falling away from the religion and falling away from God. And so then from the west, I believe, the Arabs or whatever attack, and they come riding in, and they came right in and split the 2 tribes, and then they broke Israel up right from the center, or right from between the 10 and the 2, and they fought their way through both, just chewed them up because they weren't with their God, so they didn't have access to the gifts that they needed and to the God that they needed to win these battles, and they just got overwhelmed immediately. Anyways, so the 2 southern tribes, they get pushed down south and they go into Egypt, But when they got there, Egypt was still pissed at them, so they pushed them out. Said, no, you can't fucking stay here. Keep going. And then when they got a little south of Egypt, and the next place they tried to settle, the people were like, no, fuck that, man. No, we know you guys are nothing but trouble. Fucking, there's always war following you, the Edomites and this and that, and we know too much, and we don't want you here. Move on. And then it came, we've seen those guys kick you out, so we're doing the same. You're not staying in our land. And they got pushed all the way through Africa to a place called Negro Land. And that's why they're called the N-word, because, and like I said before, it'd be like calling me a Canadian, right? If I moved down to the States, they'd say, there's that fucking Canadian. Well, it's no different. It might be derogatory or whatever, like, definitely. But I mean, it's not, that's how it's meant. That's how it started, I guess. It obviously, and then it went way further than it ever should have. Again, that's the war between Israel and Edom that follows them. So that was part of the reason that they kept kicking them out, was like, well, we know wherever you settle, Edom is eventually going to come and attack, because they want to root you out. They want you dead. They don't want you on earth anymore, or they want you underfoot. So we don't want you in our land, because you're going to attract your brother who's going to come here, or your cousins, and they're going to come here and try to murder you, and they're going to murder us in the process, and we're going to be stuck in the middle of this war. So no, move on. Take your wars elsewhere. And that's kept. So then the 10 other tribes, well, they didn't get any different response. They went in towards England and stuff. Well, they stuck out like a sore thumb. They're all dark-skinned Hebrews going north, right? So they stood even less of a chance, and they got pushed harder and faster, because at least the Hebrews that went south, well, the Hebrews had gone south generationally, and they could hide and blend into Egypt, and you couldn't really tell them apart too much unless you recognized traits, right? Anyway, so the southern tribes had a little easier time getting pushed through Egypt, but they also knew them better, so they pushed them a little faster as well. But then the northern tribe, well, they got pushed straight across and right over into Japan. Like, they went right up across northern Europe. And it's funny, because Edom, when they went into their diaspora, they were, and this was like during the rise of the Catholics, they were called gypsies by the Catholic priests. But when people were in confession, they were saying that they kept running them out of town or whatever, and killing them and like kicking them right out of town. And then they'd go to the priests and be like, well, they were worshiping Satan, and they were poisoning the wells and poisoning our water supplies, and then they were sacrificing children to gods and whatever. And so we pushed them out of town. So the priests were writing all this down, but then they were saying that's not why. That's just racism, and making up excuses for them about other things. But that's exactly what they do today, right? The Satanists, I mean, and the elite, whether you want to admit that they're Edom or not. Anyhow, so that was really an interesting little factoid. So Edom went across this way. They kind of went up from out of the Promised Land and out around and across Northern Europe through Russia and into like Scotland and all that, and then down and back back home, they made a big circle. But when the Hebrews got pushed out, the northern tribes, they did the opposite circle and ended up in Japan or over that way. And that's there's a lot of similarities in the culture between the Hebrews and Japanese as well. And then the natives are clearly are half Japanese. Like the traits are there, the physical traits are there, the hair and just a lot of things, the eyes, the skin color, the tones. You can tell that that's a Hebrew and a Japanese ancestry that came across. We found the trails underwater, and here's my theory on that. The Japanese knew of that walking trail, so, and I'm sure they probably had already populated North America all the way down, and so the Hebrews said, okay, well, we can take this same trail, and they went across that trail, and then and so what you'd do is you'd have to wait until like this time of year, early spring, and leave then to go across, and then you'd come out in like Alaska or whatever, and coming down, because Japan's here, China's here, and then there's Japan, and then there's Alaska, and then there's America. It's all a straight line right down, right? So they're coming down, and they come through Alaska and down the coastline of Canada, and then they would have just spread out through Canada, and then eventually spread their way down all the way through all of them, North America, right? But I think when you look at the maritime provinces, where I'm from, and you look at all the valleys and the hills and stuff, and it's so beautiful, and all this, just the landscape is just wonderful, and rivers, and the St. John River is like the third biggest river system in the world or whatever, and then when you get into like Edmonton and going into Quebec, all of a sudden there's just two ridges. It's like when you're driving in, you're kind of on the mouth, or in the base rather, of the hills. You're driving into Quebec, and there's like a big hill here and nothing, and then a big hill here, and a big hill here, and a big hill here, and a big hill over here. And nothing around those big hills. They're just a couple scattered little spots, mounds, and then there's two big horizons that go out all the way around. And as you go through Quebec on the highway, you're looking to both sides, and they're a long way away, but you're looking at these two horizons that follow you, and you're just in a big bowl the whole time, and there's two fucking hills. I'll bet you that the top of those hills were shorelines at one time. Guarantee you could go up there and find the evidence of the shoreline. And you like 3 hours before it finally veers off in another direction, but it's still two more hills going out. Probably all of Quebec and northern Ontario was all one lake at one time. And then here's where it gets a little funny. You had all 10 tribes of Israel coming down through, and finally get to the Great Lakes, and they say, holy smokes, well, it would have been one Great Lake at the time. And they say, Great Lake, good, we get to go for a swim, boy, right? And they strip down, and all of them jump into the lake at once, which raises the level of the lake just enough to peek over the hill. And it just peeks over the hill on the low side of Quebec. And then all of a sudden, it rips out like a dam does. And it rips and makes all of the floodplains of the maritime provinces, and rips and makes the whole St. John River and that whole riverbed and all those mountains and all those hills. And there at the mouth, where I was saying there's just those little mounds left, I'll bet you anything those mounds are solid rock. And they were just the heavy spots and the harder spots that actually withstood the rush of the flood of that water coming out of there all at the same time. And all of a sudden, whoosh. So that raised the ocean level a little bit. And then they kept going. They don't know. They kept moving on. The river wouldn't have dropped that quick. It would have taken like a week to drain that much water. 2 weeks. Longer. So that's draining out and just smashing through and tearing out all that water and all that riverbed and reshaping all of the Maritimes. And they kept going down the coast of the southern area. And then there was Lake Ukapochi or something, and the Great Lake, or Grand Lake, I believe it's called. And their flood basin would have been the Grand Canyon. And they took up those two lakes were three states, Colorado and it was three states that would be filled in. When you fill in the Grand Canyon, it fills in two massive lakes that bury three states entirely underwater. So they got to those two lakes, or one of them, and they say, oh, we get to have, and now they're down south. So it's like, oh, this is so hot. Let's jump in this lake. This will cool us down, guys, and we can clean ourselves in the lake again. And again, that's all it took. You put 10,000 people into the water. The volume goes up, peaks over the Grand Canyon, and all the evidence is there. The Grand Canyon wasn't cut billions of years and all that bullshit. First off, the Colorado River doesn't have the altitude to cut through the top of the Grand Canyon. It's lower. Secondly, there's rivers running into the Grand Canyon. They run in this way, and then they got to turn greater than 90 degrees and run back out. If it was billions or millions of years old, it would just be a smooth current. They would have already eroded all that rock down, and the water would make just a natural turn. That's what water does, path of least resistance. And it'll cut through whatever it has to. That's the whole point of the Grand Canyon, right? But if you go out to the ditch, next time it's raining, like it's coming to the good time, go to the little ditch somewheres where there's a little bit of water running, and dam it off. Build a big dam and make it fairly thick. Put a couple big rocks in there and watch what happens. Just watch it. Build it really good, as good as you can. Whatever. And it'll blast a hole. When it goes over the top of that dam, wherever it goes over the top, it'll blast a hole right to the bottom of your dam. Almost immediately. Strip it right out, and your dam won't stand a chance. Right? It'll just strip it out, and it'll bury that hole in it, except for where the big rocks were. There'll be a couple big rocks left over, and then if you leave that for 50, 100 years, there's going to be trees and things growing on those rocks, and it'll just look like a hill in the middle of nowhere. Right? But you can do this as small experimentation on a larger scale, and with the Grand Canyon, like I said, there's also no delta. In the delta, that's where when a river's cutting its way through something slowly, it over time, when it takes the debris to the mouth, and then when the water opens up and gets deep at the ocean or at the river, at the lake, at the whatever, it just drops that debris off because it can't carry it. There's not enough force in the water to carry it anymore. And that's called a delta. It'll make a big pile at the mouth of the river. You'll have a big pile, and that's how we know that a river was cut slowly over time. And that's what happens as a river keeps cutting itself and changing itself. It just keeps dumping stuff at its mouth. It's a natural process. Eventually, it could make an island, and you'll have two separate rivers going around, and they'll cut deeper channels there and make new deltas. But usually that'll stay underwater a little bit. You won't get an island. Anyhow, there is no delta for the Grand Canyon, none. And like I said, the rivers are running this way and then turning to run this way. That doesn't make any sense. That's not millions of years old. That's a couple thousand years old, right? You're just led to believe things because you're led to believe, or you're led to look at them the wrong way. And that's where that analogy of the city boy watching the farmer with a cow puller. And he gets right out of his car and comes over to the farmer, and he's just watching him. He says, "What are you doing?" And he's just watching him. Sorry. And the farmer looks up and takes a break for a minute because pulling the calf work. You're working. And he says, "You got any questions, city boy?" And the boy says, "Yeah, just one." "What is it?" "How fast do you think that cow was running to get himself stuck up there like that?" And I don't know if you know what a calf puller is. What it is in a breech birth, so the back legs are coming out first. You put this device on the hips of the cow, the mother, and then you attach it to the back legs of the calf, and it's a rope, and then you turn this crank, and it turns the rope and tightens it up, and it pulls the calf out of the mother. It works like a push or like a screw pull, and a push pull because it's pushing against her hips to pull the calf out, and then you can pull out the baby and save mother and baby, hopefully. Anyhow, so yeah, all about how you look at things and how you're reading the evidence, right? The calf wasn't running along and ran up that other calf's asshole so fast that he got himself stuck in there halfway. No, you're reading the evidence wrong. And that's what you're taught. That's why public school is so important to them. They need to teach you to look at the evidence wrong. But what I was talking about was Matt Walsh talking about aliens and trying to cram Christianity and alien technology together, and aliens at all together. And it lead me into that there cannot even be space, yet alone fucking aliens. But okay, now let's say if God did make space, and he made all that, and he made gravity so that he could magically hold all the atmosphere within the vacuum, and he was really showing his strength that way. Okay, I can believe that for a minute. So let's go to Scripture. What's he say about Earth? He says that it sits on a foundation, that it's immovable, right? So an apple core, he would have said like it has a core of intense heat or fire. He wouldn't have said it has a foundation. Immovable. That means it cannot be moved. Not that it's shooting through space, orbiting the sun, which is also shooting through space. No. Immovable. Foundation. Sits on the pillars. Then he says that he stretched the skies over the earth. It's talking about like the stars and the heavens. He says, and he stretched them over the earth. So the earth is like a flat plane, and then he stretched the dome over the top. Click. Saran wrap. And all the celestial bodies are on that dome. And then you got your sun and moon. And he even talks about stopping the sun's track and moving it, reversing it, and reverse time. So, because Buddy needed more time that day. And he said, oh, well, moving the sun forward isn't a miracle. Stop the sun. And then he stops it, and then he actually moves it backwards or whatever. I don't think God was confused about his creation when he was describing it to us. And I don't think man was misreading it. Right? Okay, so you're either be biblical or don't. Right? Okay? Now, let's put the Bible aside and talk about science that you guys are so stupid about. First off, you grease out the medical industry and you're greasing out psychology now, and you're greasing out all these other universities, and then you'll go over to other fields and worship at their fucking feet. Oh, NASA. Oh, physicists. They know everything. They got it all figured out. They're taught all the information in that university that's the exact same university where they're taught selected information by every other field. But no, not physicists, not historians, not geologists. Like, what the fuck is the matter with you? Pardon my language, but you got to be some kind of stupid. Like a real special kind of stupid to think that George Soros-funded university that's only teaching half of the medical fucking field and selected medical fucking shit in order to make money isn't gonna fuck with history and science and shit. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Should have had a V8. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And I'm not mad about it. I sound like I'm mad about it, but I'm not really mad about it. I'm putting emphasis on my words and my tone and my attitude because it needs it. It's necessary. And the same goes for not just Matt Walsh. Like, you can go Stephen Crowder, you can go his buddy Gerald there. He's got a fucking whole show now on theology. He doesn't know theology. And he does know a whole bunch about it. Then he denies a whole bunch of it, right blatantly in its face. Don't be on the fucking fence. Let every man be a liar before God. So if it's written in the scriptures and somebody's saying different, they are the liar. Now, people misconstrued the scriptures all the damn time too, and that's what you're doing. You're trying to misconstrue and read it the way you want to read it in order to abide to your theory. It's fucking narcissism is what it is. It's humanism. You want your space and your time and all this universe and all this bullshit to mix in with God so that you can feel good about yourself. Oh, I'm a Bible Christian, blah, 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 but I'm a fucking asshole spaceman. Satanist. Right? Well, the Satanists wouldn't lie to me about history or space. Heavens forbid that they'd ever lie about that. They'd only lie about the medical industry and maybe what sex I am and cut off children's penises and cut their tits off and mutilate them or whatever. That's all fine and dandy. Yeah, of course the Satanists would do that, but they would never lie about the Bible or space and time or cosmology and try to fool me on what I think about my beliefs about the Bible. No, they would never do that. They would certainly stay right out of physics, and they would never break any of the laws, because those are laws. You don't want to break laws, you get in trouble. I don't get it. And so my request to you guys and your shows, that because I love your shows, the conservative movement is necessary, all that kind of stuff, it's great, but shut the fuck up, man. Stop talking about the Bible. You don't know it. You deny it. You're a heathen. You deny it over and over and over and over again. It's not just the globe. It's not just the cosmology. It's not just the age. You also deny who the Hebrews are. I'm sure I just had a big conversation about them being the 10 lost tribes and who they are and where they went and who the other 2 tribes are and where they went. Right? And then when nobody even talks about the 13th tribe of Manasseh, just gets washed away. But They're around too. I think they're part of the southern tribes, and they just get washed in because Benjamin, they kind of amalgamate Benjamin and Manasseh together or something, and they say they deleted one tribe to let in Manasseh. Oh, they got rid of Reuben because of him, because he slept with his mom, and Joseph was mad at him, so he took away his blessing or whatever. And it's like, no, he didn't. Read the books, man. There was 13 tribes. So, anyways, so language can be manipulated, I guess, as well. That's something else we need to be concerned with when we're reading the Bible, is that when it got translated, words meant one thing and now they mean a different thing. And that could have, those same mistranslations would have happened between coming into English, but also coming from Hebrew into Greek, and then coming from Greek into English. There's bound to be Chinese telephone where you're getting a little bit different sentence than what you had originally. It's good to look into that kind of stuff too, but God said he'd protect it. It's his word. I'm sure we need to follow it. It's protected. It's real. Now let's get into science. So, and I've gotten into it a bit, where the vacuum thing, that's all impossibilities. Okay, so now you shoot a rocket out. You somehow get through the invisible barrier and you didn't damage it because it's magic or whatever. And now you're in your rocket in space. Okay, now you're in an aluminum can in a vacuum. Well, look up that experiment of a pop can under pressure put into a vacuum chamber and then the air taken out of the vacuum chamber and see what happens. So, okay, first off, you got no possibility of making it. Boom! The as soon as you get into space, your little cylinder spaceship, poof, it's gone. You don't have gravity, you don't have God to protect you, you don't have all that magic. You just got torn asunder right down to the molecules, and right, the ship would just explode or rip open. The air would be taken from it. The air would be spread out throughout space. And then you got your astronauts in their little spacesuits, right? Well, same deal. They're just a fucking pressurized material. I don't know how you guys think that material is all indestructible or whatever, but it's not. That's why, like, when they do experiments in that vacuum at NASA, when the huge vacuum chamber, they get out of it. You don't see a guy in there with an astronaut suit on, cutting the strings for the fucking bowling ball or whatever, or pushing buttons or what, you know what I mean? They get out of there and they push all the buttons from outside because they would be fucking demoleculed. They would be just evenly distributed throughout the vacuum. That's how it works. So your astronaut in his little spacesuit, the spacesuit would get ripped with the weakest place, whatever it is, she'd tear asunder, and he'd get taken out, and then like Arnold did or whatever, like you can watch guys putting their hand into a vacuum and they seal it off and then they turn the vacuum on. Man, like it's quick. And I'm sure you could probably find some sick fucker doing it to frogs or whatever. Okay, so let's say that NASA is God. So they put a magic force field around their aluminum spaceship and a magic force field around all their astronaut suits so they can break all the laws of physics. Now they're breaking the law, though, so they should be thrown in jail for breaking the laws of physics, those little buggers. Anyhow, so now you're out there in space in your can and you're in your magic can, in your magic suit, and there's no air. It's a massive vacuum. So you turn your rocket on And now you got the problem of you got to sit there and burn rocket fuel until you fill the vacuum behind yourself with molecules enough to be able to push against those molecules to give yourself thrust. So you'd have to fill all of space, at least the back half of all of space, with exhaust molecules from your rocket ship. And then you could then push against those molecules because that's how jet propulsion works. So do you see how that's physically fucking possible and that it's not going to happen, you stupid assholes? But you weren't taught any better for the most part. Some of you were, and you still blindly believe this shit. I don't get it. And like Gerald is a very highly educated man. Matt Walsh, he's young, his mind's young, I get that. But come on. You're very smart, Matt. Very, very smart. You should be looking at least a little bit of evidence by now in your life, right? There's two sides to every story. How about this? This was Solomon's thing, where he said that any man who only hears one side of the matter and makes up his mind is a fool, right? So you're a fool because you won't even listen to what I have to say. You won't even give it acknowledgement. Like what Barack Obama said, oh, well, we can't give the Flat Earth Society a time of day because it's a foolish theory. There's like 20 million of us, and it's not a foolish theory. Most, like a whack of us have very high educations. And all of us have very high educations. Let me rephrase that. We all have self-educated to the point that we look crazy to the rest of you because you're so uneducated. But that's getting into like famous quotes and things of, highly educated people are usually lonely and laughed at and ridiculed, or because they're not understood. Society of people who think they're monkeys. Literally, you think that you're a monkey, and you're proud of this. Yet, you think you have all the answers figured out. No, monkey. You thought you were a monkey, and now you act like one. And you've convinced yourself. So you live at this low level of a monkey instead of a spirit and a soul of God, a child of God. You're living like a monkey. There is no better analogy than that. One of my carpenters that I apprenticed under, that's what he would call you when you fucked up, or when he just wanted to razz you up and try to get you going, which was all the time. He constantly wanted to get everybody going. He was the fucking peanut gallery 2.0, or like fucking all the time. Just constant, whether you were fucking carpentry, shooting pool, fucking hanging out, throwing washers, anything we do, he's sitting in the corner, fucking, God rest his soul. He's great, man. Wonderful, genius carpenter. His work was phenomenal. And that's what he'd always call everybody. He called everybody a monkey when he wanted to really insult you. He'd be like, hey, monkey. Funny. And you guys aspire to being monkeys. He was obviously evolution guy as well, but raised in the system that way, like whatever. Older gentleman from that era didn't stand a chance because there was no internet for him to go out and find the real information. There is for you. Go educate yourself. You don't take my word for it. Go out and start looking all these things up. Go study history a bit, the real history. Study all of it. Like, don't just look at one book and be like, oh, well, fuck, look at the textbook says this. This is the best one from the school. The school is the enemy, or is run by the enemy. If you haven't figured that out at this time, well, I get worn down by that kind of stuff because I know people that haven't figured that out at this time. They still think that there's good within the government and stuff. Like, no, there isn't. There's no. When you get to a certain level of government, if you got good in you and good intentions and shit, the rest of the government isn't going to let you go any higher. They're going to keep you at that level or even push you back down a level. They're not going to let you rise up. And if you do happen to, they're going to use their media and all that shit to just slander the shit out of you and try to make you look evil in the eyes of the people, even though it's all the rest of them that are the evil ones. And this one guy that they're making look evil is a good one or whatever. It's just... We've seen it with Joseph Stalin and Hitler. And don't get me wrong, Hitler wasn't doing great things. He was bad. But Stalin was doing worse things. And we're still propagated by the propaganda machine to believe that Hitler was doing worse things. And that all the death, like he takes credit for a whole bunch of this death that Stalin committed, and a whole bunch of the war crimes that were Stalin's go to Hitler just to make him look worse. Just like they do with Donald Trump. It's the same thing. And probably not great guys. But how would you fucking know? You don't even know what you know about Donald Trump, and you're alive at the same time as him right now, living in the same... He was your world leader for a little while, and a lot of people still don't know what he did for them and can't compare and contrast their lifestyles under him as opposed to... And they'll say, instead of comparing that and looking at what their lifestyle was like and looking at what it's like now or whatever, they'll instead argue about things he said and things he tweeted and the way he said things or the way he handled things or some propaganda shit that the news made up. You grab him by the pussy. Grab him by the pussy. He was saying women in this age are so slutty that you can just go grab them by the pussy and they'll go home with you. We need to hold our daughters to a better standard. We need better role models, and we need to change our society. It's fucking up. We're losing our way. That's what he was saying. And then everybody's like, oh, he's a rapist. Turn your TV off. Stop watching that shit. It's unbelievable. Anyway, have a great day. I hope Matt Walsh learns his Bible soon. Same as Gerald and Stephen and all of them. Dan Bongino, you name it. Any of them. Russell Brand, J.P. Sears, whatever. Like, you name them. Joe Rogan. None of them know true science, and none of them know true Bible. And so they can't link anything together. And their minds are lost. And so don't look at them. Don't look to them for that. When they're talking about the things that they happen to have noticed already, the medical field, the gender thing, politics, and how corrupt, how that, they know that stuff and they can talk about that. But when it comes to God and spirituality and geology and biology and evolution, and they don't know anything about any of those subjects. They know one side and they haven't even looked at the other side. They have no idea what the evidence, they have no idea where the evidence came from on their side. They just know it because it was drilled into their heads when they were kids. But they don't know where it all came from, or they don't know anything behind it. They don't know any of the evidence behind it. None of that shit. They can spew out some high-sounding nonsense. But the Bible tells us about that too. It says, beware of the high-sounding nonsense. Because that's all it is. It's just using big words, terminologies, large sentences, big numbers in order to make yourself sound like you know what you're talking about when you don't. So beware of that. And pray for them. Maybe show them this video. Wake them up. Amen.